Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be creating the Dockerfile for Salt minion and establishing the connection between the Salt minion as well as the Salt master. Um, and I'm using this Salt master minion schema for Salt rather than the Salt SSH schema for Docker just to demonstrate the network interconnectivity between Salt. Between Docker, excuse me. So that way you guys can see more of Docker being used in certain situations where if I use Salt SSH, you probably might not see everything. Anyways, that being said, going back to the Salt master Docker file, I did add one thing. I added this miscellaneous mis.conf configuration file because I want the auto accept true. It means it automatically accepts Salt minions whenever basically a container would come up. It would already have the Salt agent installed and it would automatically connect to the Salt master. I want that to be true. And I also want the SSJ 512. This is a security hazard. Don't do this in production by any means. So be careful with that. I probably wouldn't even use the master minion setup for Salt with containers. I'd probably go with Salt SSH, but that's just me. Or if you're an Ansible user, that's exactly what you would use. You just use Ansible and then Ansible with SSH and deploy everything into the containers and go from there. All right. So with that said, the first thing I want to do is that now that I've got this laid out and I've already created my image, so I don't need to do anything there. I know my Salt master works, so I don't need to worry about that. What I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a network. So let's go ahead and do that. So Docker network create Salt master, or just call it Salt, just Salt. All right, so now we've got a Docker network created. And what this will do is we'll add the Salt master into this when we run it, and we'll add all the minions into this when we run it. And the connectivity between the containers that's on this particular network, this virtual network of Docker containers that we've made, will be automatically accepted. It wouldn't matter. So any communication between the two particular containers or any containers that's part of this Salt network will be accepted. So with that said, I've already built the container, so I don't need to worry about that. Let's go ahead and run it for now. So let me go ahead and run this in daemon mode. And before we actually finish this, let's go ahead and go over what this command is. It's a fairly long command. So docker run, meaning run a container. V for volume, and this first bit, so my documents, this whole folder, mounted to SRV Salt base. And another V for another volume, and mount the pillars folder into SRV Salt base pillars. And then name my container Salt master, make it in daemon mode, and the image is Salt master, and the tag is 1.0. Fairly simple. If this works, unfortunately, the container name Salt master is already there. I see. Docker ps, okay, yep, there it is. So I'm just gonna go ahead and remove them. I'll remove both of them. So let me explain what I did in the Docker ps or Docker remove. So Docker rm, not rmi, rm removes any existing either dead or running or current running containers. If it's a current running container, you may want to run docker kill first. Docker kill in the container name or the container ID. If it's already dead, which is, these two status right here, they've already exited, then you need to remove them completely before you can run a container with the same name. So docker ps-a aq just gives us the container ID, which is just these two. And I basically just fed that into Docker RM. So And this is my fish shell, so normally you would probably put a $sign here. But my fish shell will complain, don't do this, not supported. So if you're in bash, be careful with that. Anyways, so that being said, let's go ahead and run it again in daemon mode, and we're up and running. See? -AQ if I want to do it, that just gives me the container ID. All right, so now that we're up and running, let's go ahead and create the minion Dockerfile real quick. We'll copy much of this actually, but we'll change some of these to salt minion. We won't have the same config files. We won't even need pillars anymore, and we'll run salt minion. So new file. This will be Dockerfile, obviously. Dockerfile. And I'll need to rename it, I'm sure. All right, so anything that says master, change to minion. These configs won't be the same. So I'll get rid of those for now. This, I probably won't even need that. That's fine. And this will be salt minion. And let's start there. So in my minion, creating it from Ubuntu 16.04, I'm running apt-get update. I don't know if I need iNotify tools, but I'll add it on there just to be safe. Okay, so I need to copy over the salt minion config. So the only thing I need is to point to the master. So my current running container, I need to find out what's the IP for this. So docker inspect salt master. Now, inspect will give me all sorts of information regarding memory and what it's running and so on, container image ID of the specific container that I put in the argument. So again, path, name, salt master. This is the full image ID. As you can see, it's like the one we get here is sort of like the last few. So this is the image ID. So that's, if you run Docker images, that's the full image ID. So when you run Docker images and get the image ID there, it's the last few characters of the image ID that you see in inspect. And it's the same thing with the container ID. So when you run Docker PS, we only get the last few characters of the container ID as well. So that being said, so that's the image ID, and these are binds. This is what we bind it into the from the host to the container. Bind meaning the volume flag that we've added into the container. So whenever we make changes on our local machine, it automatically gets populated into the remote machine, into the remote container or the local container, and we don't have to do anything about pushing or restarting the container from there on. And these are just more info about I/O and memory and so on. And that's about it. So again, more bind info for the directories. So what I want is the IP address. So under network settings, you'll see IP address. So for this container, the IP address is 172.17.0.2. Now, normally I wouldn't need this because I've got the network that I've created for Docker. But Salt will still need to point using an IP address or a host name. So unfortunately, because of that, I need to have an IP address for the minion config. So I'm going to go ahead and use this for the minion config. And that's probably the only config I'll need. So new file, and I'll name this master, and that's the master. And I believe it's just, let me double check actually. Configuring salt minion. I forget if it's lowercase. Okay, yeah, it's lowercase. Great. Spectacular. All right, so we got the master conf, and then now we're just going to copy the master conf over. So we can say /master.conf, and that will be in etc salt minion.d master.conf. Now, I forgot to explain. Maybe I did explain last time. There's another way to copy over stuff using the Dockerfile, and that is if you run the add command. Add command is meant to copy over whole directories, where copy is just meant over to copy individual files. So I could say add and then my documents, whatever it is, right? And then over to /home. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving an example. Add is only meant for full-on folders and recursive folders, obviously, recursively copying over as well, where copy is meant for individual files. That doesn't mean that you can't use add to copy individual files over. It's bad practice if you do, but it's possible. Anyways, so now that we've got that, so that's going to go ahead and run apt-get update, install salt minion inotify tools, master.conf copy over into etc salt minion.d master.conf, and it's going to run salt minion. So each time I'm not going to name the container because there's really no point in naming the container. Each time they're going to have a new name. So I'd rather they just name themselves and just go from there. Now, with that said, I would probably have a different if I were to use a master minion configuration in like using Kubernetes or Amazon ECS, I would probably have a different master for each set. So I'd have a different master for application, different master for web front end, and so on and so on. That way, I don't mix up which container for what part of the application. I can keep steady and track there. Especially since the top file.sls is probably not going to be helpful if you go off of the salt minion name, which is usually the host name. You don't want to go off the host name because these are all containers. You probably want to go like set specific grains file within the minion config, and we can do that. Set specific grains file within the minion, and then just go off of that. So we can use that bit. Anyways, but this isn't a salt tutorial. This is a Docker tutorial, so I'm going to keep it like this. So I've created the network. I've created my Dockerfile. I actually need to rename this Dockerfile because it's a Dockerfile.Dockerfile, and I hated how my text editor does that. It's a little annoying. All right. Let's go ahead and build this image. Oops. Why did I do that? There it is. Okay. All right, so docker build -t salt minion 1.0. Build, not built. Build with a D. There it is. Okay, everything's looking good. This will take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and skip forward.